to the militia, the stockpiling of ammunition, supplies, paying of militia, raising the pay rate of militia because it wasn't enough for the area, things like that. So the documentation and the precedence is there. It's there in many, many fold. And anybody that would like more information, committee.org, there's a whole bunch there. And if you need more, well, email me, randymac@youhavtreadonme.com.
Awesome. Thanks a whole lot, Randy. I mean, basically what we're getting at here is that fundamental part of a unit is you cannot be an effective check and balance if you are not subordinate to a civil authority.
Now,
and at that point... Oh, sorry.
One other thing. I wanted to clarify one other thing, okay? Because that does not... let us not, though, negate the importance of private groups as well. Let's address them as well. Because if we look back at during the Revolution, and remember, the Revolution was not the war. That was just the end result of the Revolution that happened. The Revolution was in the minds and the actions of the colonists before the war ever happened. It was the tar and the feathering. It was the hanging at the Liberty Tree by one of these private groups, the Sons of Liberty. They were vital to getting the Revolution up and running. They were vital to it carrying on. You know, we look throughout the history of our country and we see that it wasn't just militia. It was other groups as well, the Sons of Liberty and many others that were probably out there. You know, I unfortunately haven't read every single book on history and I don't know them all, but they were there. These private organizations that are acting outside of the capacity of militia or under orders of Committee of Safety are vital as well. There is a plan out there. Gary drafted together one hell of a plan, and if you compare that plan with the things that Joseph P. Martino wrote in his book, Resistance to Tyranny, you will not find one single thing lacking. And the plan came out before and Gary was working on the plan long before I brought Martino on the show, which is interesting. Those two minds correlated perfectly on that plan, it seemed like, and one wrote a book about priming for it, the other one wrote the plan for a hypothetical scenario. So if you haven't read the plan, go back and read the plan. But in that plan, though, we call for other groups and organizations, those that are acting outside of the official capacity and role of the militia. These are private security teams, whatever you want to call it. There was groups in the old days that were called Sons of Liberty. So those groups will be just as important as well.
Now, I'm not trying to start a fight with you here, Randy. I'm just trying to
go ahead.
As thorough as possible here. What if one of those private groups decides that its interpretation of the Constitution and the rule of law is basically their own interpretation?
You know, that becomes a scary thing then.
Yeah.
You know, and I can understand the concerns there. You know, what would happen then? Well, it depends on what we have organized. For instance, let's take a look at Katrina. Let's use Katrina as an example of a Committee of Safety, okay? Let's pretend that FEMA didn't go in there. Let's say that we actually had strong committees of safety. There were a strong militia presence, and we were actually constitutional. So while our government is trying to get their crap together, the committees of safety roll out. They got blankets, food. They're getting things organized. They bring out the militia to set up security, to make sure there's no looting and other things like the militia is supposed to. And then let's say that we got rogue groups out there who decide that they're interpreting the Constitution differently and they're in outlying areas. So they start doing things. Well, at that point, the areas that did have a strong militia already established and the committees of safety already established, they would be able to handle those situations because those committees of safety would say those people have gone rogue.
Exactly.
And it is now time to go get them. And they would either send out, portions of their militia, or they would get with other towns and say we need a combined militia because this is happening on a county level, and we need to take them out. We need to bring them to justice. So then those committees would all get together and say, okay, we need to form a county militia, or we need to get send our militia there, or units of our militia to form that county unit so they can go hunt these criminals down and bring them to justice. It would be for the rogue government officials who became rogue and began raping and pillaging upon the people, murdering the people even during that Katrina area. You know, there was a lot of stuff that Gary wrote, and one of them is how can the committees of safety be used today? Must be read. If you're trying to understand how to put together a militia, how to set up a committee of safety, or even the role of the committees of safety, you got to read that. But again, none of this is on YouTube, so unfortunately, we do have to begin educating ourselves. We have to make that gray matter fire up again. We got to start teaching ourselves to think again and comprehend.
Yeah, that's where it all begins, is educating yourself and adopting the mindset that, adopting the lifestyle that is the Constitution. Eating, sleeping, and breathing it. And ultimately, a militia unit can never be an effective check and balance like they were designed to be without a committee of safety, without a competent civil power to be subordinate to.
Well, Gary Hunt made a statement in there, and I have to, honestly, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for Gary Hunt, I truly believe that a lot of this information would be lost. I vaguely remembered hearing about committees of safety. I'm only 40, so it's not like I'm an old geezer here, but, even when I was a kid, committees of safety were mentioned a sentence in the entire textbook. Two sets of encyclopedia don't mention them. They've been deleted. If it truly wasn't for Gary, back after Waco, trying to realize we need a plan, we need some way to... Gary was looking to cause revolution. Now we're trying a different route. We're trying something, we're trying the constitutional plan. But Gary started looking at what the Founding Fathers had and what they didn't have. And the only reason that they succeeded was because we did not engage in the exact same thing that France did later. We had a civil authority. They did not. They had militia. We had a civil authority and the militia. When all the nobility were gone and the power and there was a power vacuum left, what happened? All those guys with the armed bodies looked at each other and said, "I'm in charge," at the same time. And then at the same time they said, "No, you're not." And the heads continued to roll. If we look, Gary made a perfect point as well. When militia become political, the police state follows. Tyranny follows. Let's look at every militia, quote unquote militia, or People's Revolutionary Army, or whatever you want to call it, that has risen up. How many of them had a civil authority? None. How many of them ended up in tyrannical governments? All of them. Yeah. Castro, Che Guevara, Noriega. I mean, the list is on and on. Look throughout the history of the world. There's only been one time that any people have gone into rebellion against their government for freedom, and they did not end up upon civil war after civil war after civil war immediately. Or they didn't end up in a tyrannical state, and that was the U.S., and that's because we did something different. We had a civil authority, we had them, and we had the militia.
Yeah, and everything about that was lawful. That was the biggest difference.
And it was lawful. The king and Governor Andros had nothing to say about it because the people had acted within their rights of their laws.
Exactly.
And we kept those laws. We kept that very concept. So, sorry about that. I got long-winded there.
I'll let it slide this time.
Any questions, though, on that? And don't worry, man. I encourage these debates. Bring the questions. Bring them all. If people have questions, that means they're seeking knowledge. That means they're confused about something and they're looking for more answers. So don't ever worry about the hard questions with me. Bring all questions.
Got about 20 minutes left here on the broadcast, and I'm going to one more time tell everybody in the chat room listening in right now, post your questions up there. I haven't been able to keep track of all of them. Put your name in on Skype, we'll bring you in, or give a call. Surprised we haven't gotten any yet. So I got a couple more questions for our guests, and this one I'm going to ask Amelia. You still there?
I'm sorry, Amelia is not available right away.
Okay. Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about standards, standard operating procedure, standardizing things. There's an argument to be made that standardizing one uniform or standardizing firearms or something like that, they all have their individual needs and their individual... Sorry about that, I'm blanking out on the word. Individual uses. If you're standardizing firearms and ammunition, everybody, has an opportunity in case it gets too thick. Now, you had said that standardizing, you had mentioned standardizing a uniform, and you said that would have been detrimental, if I'm not mistaken, or was that something else you were speaking on?
I'm sorry, who are you looking for?
Basically, what do you think about standardizing things like uniforms and firearms and ammunition?
No, I think that there's a few things that I'd like to address, and including a couple of things that Mr. Mack touched on, if I may. But as far as uniforms, the United States is a large body of land, and the terrain changes drastically across our country. Having a standardized uniform for the effectiveness, if you're talking about a camouflage uniform, no, I think that's absolutely out the door. That should be decided unit by unit or by the committees of safety that might direct a particular militia. Now, in reference to what Mr. Mack said, I didn't touch on that. I didn't realize that he was going to be putting this information out. I didn't want to touch on that because he is absolutely much more of an expert. I've been reading some of his writings about this and doing some research of my own, and much of what he says I absolutely agree with. A militia without being subordinate to a specific civilian authority really is nothing more than what I have seen in third world countries known as warlords.
There you go.
They're factions and tribes of armed men who do as they wish with impunity, or at least mostly with impunity, and they tend to victimize the people that live in that particular region. I'm glad that he's brought this up. I didn't realize he was going to be discussing this on this show, but I have not completed my research on this. I can't dispute everything that anything that he says. At the same time, because I haven't completed my research, I can't confirm that he's absolutely on the mark. All I can say is I think that he has much more information about this than I have at this time, and that everything that he has said and that I have read seems to fall in line with absolutely everything that I have researched.
Hey, no worries. And if I do say something wrong, please let me know. I'm still learning as I go. Like I said, Gary, I started learning from Gary 2 years ago. Gary's been studying them for over 20 years. I study. I was a quick student. I was a quick learner. I saw the need for them right away, and I've, put my biggest efforts into really learning about them over the last 2 years. So if I ever do say something that wasn't quite correct, you let me know so I can correct myself, all right?
Well, the only thing I would question you on is in your statement about militias or paramilitary units inside any type of government becoming involved with the government, eventually falling into a tyrannical state or an oppressed state. And I would ask you to take a look at Sinn Féin with the IRA.
What now?
Sinn Féin, the political arm of the Irish Republican Army.
Oh yes, we've discussed them on the show. In fact, we discussed them with Joe Martino, the author of the book Resistance to Tyranny.
Okay.
We went into great detail about them. Yes.
I'm sorry?
I said we went into great detail about them. Yes, they were the political arm. They were the covert operation of the Irish movement. They were that covert group, the overt group, while the IRA was the covert group.
Right. Roger that. And I don't believe that finally resulted in tyranny for Ireland. And also, in reference to militia becoming involved in political lobbies, in politics at all, in reference to what we're trying to do with CECOM and having an organized voice is not just about militia. I wanted to clear this up for your listeners. Make sure that they understand that the political lobby that we're attempting to put together is about all patriot groups and individual patriots in the United States. We have, the Tea Parties have gone a long way. However, they are still fractured and don't have a unified voice. And in the communities of safety would absolutely fall arm in arm with that, because the communities of safety could have a network of their own that could be the voice of true constitutional restoration idea. And I do want to complete my research on this, and looking at the little compared to that. I've only to look at it.
You're
Hang on.
you're coming in quite garbled. Would you be able to speak into the phone?